In the wild forests of early West Virginia, danger was everywhere. Thick woods hid enemies, and death could come without warning. In this harsh land lived a man whose name alone caused fear. Native warriors called him the Death Wind, a force that struck suddenly and vanished just as fast. His name was Lewis Wetzel, a frontiersman as fierce as the land he lived on. Lewis Wetzel was born in 1763, at a time when the Ohio Valley was one of the most contested and dangerous regions in North America. For European settlers, the land represented fertile ground and the promise of a new life. For native tribes, such as the Shawnee, Wyandot, Delaware, and Mingo, it was ancestral territory under constant threat from expanding settlements. This ongoing conflict defined the world Lewis was born into and ensured that violence was a daily reality rather than an exception. Settler families lived in isolation, often miles from their nearest neighbors, relying on themselves for protection. Cabins were vulnerable, and everyday tasks like gathering water, farming, or hunting carried real risk. An attack could come without warning, and the Wetzel family understood that survival depended on readiness. From an early age, Lewis was taught discipline and self-reliance. He learned to handle a long rifle, move through wooded terrain without being seen, and read tracks accurately. By his teenage years, he had already accepted the harsh realities of frontier life, experiences that hardened him and laid the foundation for the reputation he would later earn. In 1778, when Lewis was 15, his life changed forever. He and his brother Jacob were tending corn near their settlement. Though it was a normal task, danger was always close. A group of Wyandot warriors attacked suddenly. Lewis was shot across the chest, badly wounded. The brothers were captured and taken deep into the wilderness. For settlers, captivity was one of the greatest fears, often leading to years of hardship or death. For 2 days, the brothers were forced to march through forests and across rivers. They didn't know what would happen to them. Captivity could mean adoption, slavery, or execution. Fear followed them every step. On the second night, when the guards became careless, Lewis acted. He whispered to Jacob, and together they slipped free and escaped into the darkness. Injured, starving, and lost, they relied on their knowledge of the land to survive. Against all odds, they reached Fort Henry alive. The experience changed Lewis forever. From that day on, he swore he would never be captured again. The fear, pain, and escape hardened him, shaping the ruthless determination that would define his life. This moment marked the beginning of his legend, the birth of the man who would become known as the Death Wind. In 1786, Lewis Wetzel was traveling with members of his family on a hunting expedition along a river route in the upper Ohio Valley, near present-day Wheeling Creek, an area commonly used by frontier families for transportation, hunting, and trade, despite its known dangers. Such routes were predictable, which made them especially vulnerable to ambush. According to multiple frontier accounts, the attackers waited until the Wetzel family was fully exposed, likely during a moment when weapons were not immediately ready and attention was divided. The attack began suddenly and at close range, with gunfire erupting without warning. Several members of the Wetzel family were killed almost immediately, leaving little chance for organized resistance. The violence was brief but decisive, suggesting planning rather than a spontaneous encounter. Lewis Wetzel survived the attack either because he was not hit in the opening shots or because he managed to reach nearby cover quickly. But survival did not mean escape from the event itself. He witnessed the killings directly, seeing family members fall in front of him, and there is no indication that he was able to fight back or prevent the outcome. Frontier sources emphasize that the ambush unfolded too quickly for meaningful response. reinforcing the sense of helplessness experienced by those caught in it. This event is consistently identified as the defining trauma of Wetzel's life, not simply because of the loss itself, but because it demonstrated to him that the frontier offered no warning, no fairness, and no protection for those who hesitated or trusted routine. After this incident, contemporaries noted a clear change in his behavior, marking this moment as the psychological break between Lewis Wetzel, the frontier youth, and Lewis Wetzel, the solitary hunter who would later become feared across the region. Following the 1786 ambush, Lewis Wetzel began operating almost exclusively alone, rejecting the common frontier practice of moving in groups or participating in militia actions. Rather than engaging in defensive patrols or retaliatory raids with others, he focused on individual tracking and ambush tactics, a choice that allowed him complete control over movement, timing, and escape. Wetzel did not attack indiscriminately. He tracked native groups traveling through established corridors, using signs such as footprints, bent grass, disturbed soil, broken branches, and abandoned camp remains to determine direction, speed, and numbers. He often followed these trails for extended periods, sometimes days, waiting for the moment when the terrain offered maximum advantage. His preferred ambush sites were locations that limited movement, including narrow paths, creek crossings, wooded slopes, or areas where travelers were forced into single file. From concealed and often elevated positions, Wetzel fired a single shot, carefully aimed to kill or incapacitate immediately, avoiding prolonged engagement. Crucially, he never remained in the same position after firing. He relocated quickly, sometimes circling wide to approach from another angle, using terrain features to conceal movement and erase his trail. Survivors of these encounters later reported hearing shots from different directions at different times, leading them to believe they were facing multiple attackers rather than a single individual. This confusion was intentional. Wetzel's objective was not total destruction, but psychological disruption. Groups frequently broke formation, abandoned supplies or wounded members, and fled the area entirely. These repeated experiences, carried by survivors back to their communities, formed the foundation of Wetzel's reputation. He was feared not because he announced himself or sought confrontation, but because his attacks were silent, precise, and impossible to predict. Over time, the name Death Wind emerged, reflecting the perception that death arrived without warning and vanished just as quickly, leaving no clear target for retaliation. One of the most frequently cited encounters involving Lewis Wetzel occurred when he was actively pursued by a group who believed they had successfully tracked him and intended to corner him. Rather than attempting to outrun the pursuers blindly, Wetzel retreated deliberately, choosing routes through difficult terrain that limited speed and visibility while maintaining enough distance to prevent encirclement. During this retreat, he relied on a skill that would later become central to his legend: the ability to reload his long rifle while moving. Reloading a flintlock rifle under normal conditions required careful steps, including measuring powder, seating the ball, and preparing the firing mechanism, all actions that were dangerous to perform while under pressure or in motion. Wetzel had trained himself through repeated practice to perform these steps efficiently without stopping, allowing him to remain mobile while preparing to fire again. As the pursuit continued, he turned briefly from cover, fired a controlled shot aimed to disrupt the group, and immediately resumed his withdrawal. Whether casualties were inflicted or simply threatened, the effect was decisive. The pursuers were forced to slow or break formation, realizing that closing the distance would expose them to further fire. Wetzel then used pre-selected escape routes, often crossing terrain that erased tracks or forced the pursuers to split up, causing the pursuit to collapse entirely. What mattered most was not the exact number of shots fired, but the realization among those chasing him that he could not be overtaken safely. This encounter reinforced the belief that Wetzel was not just elusive, but tactically superior, capable of fighting while retreating and controlling engagements even when outnumbered. Survivors spread the story widely, amplifying its impact and strengthening the perception that confronting Lewis Wetzel directly was not only dangerous, but futile. To many settlers, Lewis Wetzel was seen as a defender, a man who struck back when others felt helpless. At the same time, his actions were deeply controversial. His pursuit of revenge often pushed him beyond restraint, and there were moments when violence continued even as opportunities for peace existed. In that way, his life reflected the wider tragedy of the frontier, where fear fueled retaliation, and retaliation ensured the conflict never truly ended. Over time, Wetzel's reputation only grew stronger. His name carried different meanings depending on who spoke it: security to some, terror to others. That divided legacy is what keeps his story alive. If you found this video interesting, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you see Lewis Wetzel as a protector or as a man consumed by violence? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.